Hello and welcome once again to Curiosity Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So this is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while, and it's a little bit loaded, a little bit heated, and so you'll understand why we're 20-something episodes in before we've covered this topic, but I think it's a very important one and certainly will touch a lot of people, positively or negatively, I don't think neutrally. But as we attempt to do in all of these conversations, this really is just food for thought. We want to challenge ourselves in how we approach some of these subjects. We want to encourage you to be challenged in the way that you think and interact with others about certain topics. And again, we'll see where this goes. But ultimately, we all have personal belief systems. We have them in faith, we have them in politics, we have them probably even as it pertains to our position in the world, where maybe I'm talking along the lines of where you stand environmentally and our responsibility personally and as a culture and as a society. And so all of these different topics we have strong personal beliefs on, strong personal values. And so the big question for today is what happens when you have a very strong stance and you come against someone else with a very strong stance? How do you operate in the space of curiosity, not judgment, when you clearly do have a personal judgment?
And what do you do about that judgment practically? How do you coexist, especially if it's a family member?
So let's dive into it. We'll hit a few subheadings, I suppose, along the way. So faith is a big one. Faith is probably the biggest one that I can think of that riles up the most percentage of people worldwide. And so you personally, I do, you do, we all have our faith convictions, even if that means, I don't believe in anything other than myself. That's a faith conviction in and of itself, right? So where you land on that spectrum and where you have, I guess, put your flag in the ground is a place that you have come to after a lot of thinking and praying and contemplating and researching, and you believe what you believe very passionately. And so it is just a matter of time before you're going to come against somebody that has either a slightly different or a radically different position than you. And how do you engage in healthy, honoring conversation with somebody that you judge to be of a different faith?
So, a lot of things come to mind when this happens, when this comes up. But I think we have to start with the fact that we're all on this planet together. I was recently at an energy conference, and a friend of mine who's Native American stood up and said, we've got kind of and he used his hands, you kind of got the oil and gas folks over here, and you kind of got the solar and wind folks over here. And I thought he was going a completely different way than he went, but he said, but you know what? We're all part of Mother Earth. And the only conflict that we have with things that are contained within Mother Earth are caused by us. And I think we need to think hard about whether that is our intent.
If our personal intent is conflict, is that what you're saying?
Or in this context, yes, it was. Is our intent conflict? Or is our intent the fact that we all belong to this world and we ought to see if we can get along?
So I can instantly think of the jokes, the sarcasm that comes with the whole why can't we all just get along phrase. And there are very passionate people who would say with a great deal of conviction, we must spread the truth. Our truth that we believe to be the truth, we must spread it because other people that don't share that truth are in the dark, are in jeopardy, are in fill in the blank. And so there is a very passionate position to make others aware of their truth.
Yeah, sure. And if I feel like I've got the light, I suppose I'd want to spread that light. If I had a friend who didn't know about something that I thought could help them, I'm going to share that with them. And I think in that regard, that's fine. I will tell you a couple of things from my experience. There's the old adage that people want to buy, but they don't want to be sold. There's the the old joke I say all the time about there's 3 ways to get something done: do it yourself, delegate it, or tell your teenager not to do it. And
Yeah.
and within that is, people don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
We the joke on there is about teenagers, but I don't like to be told what to do.
Sure.
And so if I come to a conclusion on my own, I will probably have a pretty good basis for where that comes from. And if that becomes my truth, that becomes my truth. But I guess my question to your question of, if you come up against somebody who's got the truth and it's different than your truth, I guess I would say, well, where is that person on their journey? Not necessarily do they have the truth or do they not have the truth, more of where are they on the journey?
Well, you said a couple things that I think are very important in this conversation. You said, if I have a friend who I feel that doesn't have information that I have, the word friend, I think, is exceptionally important in this dialogue, because I can share something with you as a friend that I likely couldn't share and have you receive in the same way if you're a stranger, and even less of a chance that you're going to receive it if you're somebody that views me as a potential enemy.
No question. I mean, we all know from our own experience that if your best friend says something to you, your worst enemy says something to you, you're going to possibly accept it from your friend. There's no way you're going to accept it from your enemy, right? And so I think it starts with relationship, and it comes back to relationship. It always does, in my humble opinion. But yeah, I mean, the relationship is the first part of it. Why would I hear something from somebody that I don't trust? If I've not built that trust, then there's really no basis for the conversation. Now, can you have conversations with people you don't trust? Absolutely. But you're probably not going to receive things in the same way.
Sure.
Unless their trust is there.
So we can't do anything about how people come at us, but we can always do something about how we respond to them. So in the principles of all the things that we're trying to accomplish here with this podcast and video series, let's talk about what that response looks like. So you've got somebody, your great aunt, your next door neighbor, your business colleague, that comes at you in a moment that they are passionately wanting to proclaim something to you, and you don't share the same beliefs. You don't share the same set of values. How do you listen with curious ears and honor them in conversation?
So, you know me, I always kind of dissect things into categories. The first thing is, what's the intent here? What's the intent of the conversation? Are we going to have a discussion and talk about each other's views and try to convince the other one? Does the other person just need you to listen? Are they working things out for themselves? I often work things out for myself by talking it out with another person. I may state something that sounds like I'm stating a belief. It's really me kind of formulating my own thoughts as to what do I believe about this, and I'm doing that in a way that may sound like I already believe it, but I can be formed, right? So that doesn't answer your question. I guess the answer to the question is, what's the intent of the conversation? Are we going to have a dialogue, a dialogos, where we actually, share meaning, or am I going to listen to your argument and then respond? Are we going to have a debate? Or do I just need to listen to you and say, I'm really happy that you're happy that that works for you. I disagree, and I think we can just leave it there. If the person says, no, I want to have an argument with you. I want to have a discussion with you. I think it's really a good thing to say, well, what is it? I mean, do you want to have a dialogue? Do you want to have a discussion? Do you want to have an argument? Do you want to have a debate? Are you going to try to convince me? Now, in the heat of the battle, we often don't ask those questions.
Sure.
But in an ideal situation, we would.
Well,
right?
so what if the answer is, I'm going to try to convince you?
Wasn't necessarily looking for to be convinced today. It's towards the end of the day. I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. But give it your best shot. You know,
All right.
I guess
Deflect with humor.
You know, well, humor's a big part of who I am. But I would say that again, coming back to what well, I just said something that's important. I said in the heat of the battle. Whenever I say that to myself, I always ask myself, why are you battling? Right? We don't have to battle. We choose to battle.
Yeah.
And so when I say in the heat of the battle, which I often do, and I often find myself in, I really should be asking, why am I battling? First of all, and if it's a worthy battle, and if it's going to be a great intellectual discussion that I'm going to enjoy, well, then let's go for it. But if it's something that is not worth battling over, you know, and I don't have to be disrespectful. I don't have to be rude. I don't have to share how passionate I am with a loud, intimidating voice. We can just have a conversation. So that's the issue. What is the intent of the parties? Is the intent for that person just to shout me down? I've been shouted down many times. Is the intent of that person to try to convince me? Is the intent of that person to really listen to what my response would be? Sometimes people are so intimidating that I don't even have a response. Well, what's your response? You must have a response. You know what? I don't even feel like I want to talk about this anymore. Can I just leave?
Yeah.
No, I want to have this out. I want to have it out right now. Okay. I'm going to be an unwilling participant, right? And so, you know, that's all part of it. What is the intent of the parties?
Yeah.
And there are people who just want to shout. There's people. As you know, I did a brief stint in the mayor's office, 4 years, not brief. And one of the things you learn really quickly when you're in a city government position is that the people who are loudest are not necessarily the most valid viewpoints.
Right.
They might be, but they're not necessarily. And people who seem to want to try to convince you of something is almost a red flag for me now after that experience. It's like, you know, I wasn't asking to be convinced. I'm happy to hear you out. I like to hear other people's viewpoints. But there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yes.
Empathy is, okay, I think I've heard what you said. I can even repeat it to you if you want. But sympathy is I agree with you.
Right.
And I want to make it really clear up front that I'll absolutely listen to you if that's what you need. But I'm going to separate that understanding what you're saying to agreeing with you. I don't have to agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, you do because it's the truth. Or yes, you do because this is what I've determined is the way. I'm not there yet.
Yeah. And maybe that simple statement is a way to kind of wind it down. I hear you. Thank you for sharing, but I'm not there yet.
And the yet gives it a permission. You know, you're not saying, oh, that sounds stupid, or I'll never get there. You're just saying, not there yet.
I think this might sound like I'm changing topics. I don't think it is. I think it's part of the undercurrent of this whole issue. But when you start to have somebody who's really in your face, the loud voice, the trying to convince you, and things get elevated to a place of anger, I think one of the lessons that I've been uncovering and learning over the last few years is that anger is a secondary emotion, and really the primary emotion is fear. And it would behoove us in the moment when someone is getting very angry about their position, or angry that you're not buying into their position, to consider what is the fear element underneath the anger. And let's go to politics for a moment. You get very angry about the way, you know, something is happening in the news media that a politician has done or said, and, you know, up in arms about it, bulging veins out of the neck, face red, the whole 9 yards. But really the fear is, this is going to disrupt life as I know it. And I don't know how to deal with life in a different way than I know it. And I don't think the people that are having these angry outbursts have even processed that for themselves, but it really does drive a lot of these very angry conversations. And I think the same holds true in religion. I think you can pick a number of topics, you know, a passionate, angry outburst about our responsibility towards how we handle the earth, or pollution, or global warming, or fill in the blanks. The undercurrent really is fear. If you don't believe what I believe, I'm afraid X will happen. And if we could be transparent and honest about the fear part of it, I think there would be such a different response as we came together to have these conversations.
I think it's a good point. Fear is not a word that we sometimes use the word fear without thinking about what its meaning is, or what its implications are, or what it means to us at the time. So somebody who's very angry might say, I'm not afraid, I'm not fearful of anything. Your anger is probably coming from your fear of losing something. What am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove? And to whom? And if I can't prove it to you, I'm fearful that my position isn't going to be heard. I'm afraid that things will change, that will not be a benefit to me. It'll be a detriment to me. And I think that's a big driving factor. I agree with you that it all comes down to fear, but we don't necessarily feel like we're in fear when we're angry.
Right.
And so taking a step back and say, what am I afraid of losing here? What is the issue with this position, or this statement, or this thing that I don't like? What is it that I don't like about it? I mean, that's how you ask the curious questions. What is it that I don't like about this? And why don't I like it?
Yeah. So that generates some additional thoughts in me about when you find yourself in a conversation, you're in a room with somebody who's getting the bulging veins and the red face, and they're up in arms about their position. If we can stop before we respond back in anger, because really that's a judgment, like, you're wrong, I've got my position, let me throw back at you the same level of intensity you're giving me. Instead, if we can pause and go through that mental exercise of what is the fear issue beneath this topic. So again, if it's one of religion, if it's one of politics, if it's one of environment, what is the fear that may potentially be driving that outburst? And then how do we, again, with honor, cultivate a question that might bring it down a notch, that would actually re-engage us in dialogue rather than persuasive arguments?
I mean, you can try to rewind or fast forward. Sometimes is one of many techniques. But okay, so let's say this happens. Then what? And why is that a problem? Okay, wait a minute. How did we get here? How is it that we're in a position where your stand or your position or my position could even take place? What led up to this? What was the original intent of this framework or strategy that's got us here? Sometimes that helps people to say, okay, wait a minute. The original intent was back here. And now I'm here, forwarding a position that is very distant from the original intent. Yeah. Maybe we can get back to the original intent. Or maybe we can get back to a place where we do agree. And maybe it's something that we agree on the basis of where we're trying to go. There's been some unintended consequences, which often happens in politics, for instance. Now, how do we drag that back? Is it worthwhile to try to tweak where we're currently at? Should we scrap and start over? Or should we come up with a different set of laws that make things happen, a little better? This is the problem, though, with government and laws, and that is there's very few feedback loops. We don't, in business, you try something, and if it's not working, you start losing money, you make a different decision really quick.
Sure.
It's a sustainability issue. In the rule of government and laws and regulations, we often put out a law and then it has very unintended consequences. And we don't know what to do because it's a law.
Yeah, you can't reel it back in.
You can't reel it back in. If it were up to me, all laws would say, okay, we're going to make this law, and in 6 months we're going to evaluate and see how it's doing, right? Every law sunsets after a year, and we have to make new laws. It's not realistic, but you know what I mean. I would at least like to have that attitude more than the, well, we made it a law, so we're stuck with it.
Right.
And you know, we voted on this, we made it a law. It's like, yeah, but we didn't know it was going to do this. And now what do we do?
Right.
Well, we'll make another law that makes it back towards the other way. Well, then why don't we reevaluate the first law? Anyway, we are one of the only states here in New Mexico that has this weird, most states have this thing that says if you're going to pass a law, somebody does a quick analysis to make sure that it's not counter to any other laws that are already on the books. There's a name for it, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it right now, but we don't have that here.
Interesting.
And so we can literally, and I've run across this in some of my healthcare companies, where it says you shall do this in one set of regs, and it says you shall do this in the other, and they're opposite each other. And you have to make an interpretation. Which way will I get in the least amount of trouble by following? Where's the least risk to the business?
Interesting.
So, and all that to come back to your question of what do we do when there's a position taken that gets us really angry? And really what that does is it says, I'm afraid of losing something. I'm afraid of losing power. I'm afraid of losing worth. I'm afraid of losing monetary benefit. I'm afraid of losing business. I'm afraid of losing something.
Well, I'm afraid of change, right? I mean,
Or I'm afraid of change.
which I think most people would not want to say out loud. And I even know a few folks, and I thought I was among them years ago when I got really restless with how things were in the house, and I wanted to change the layout of the furniture, and I wanted to change the decor on the wall. And I would have said back then, I love change. But I'm realizing how much I don't love change.
Well, but change depends on a number of factors. Season, time of life. You know, I know that when I'm 85, I'm not going to be looking to change something every day. Right. But I do I'm seen as, I have a reputation of somebody who likes to change things and mess things up and disrupt things where I'm at now. But we all use this. We use it against each other. Well, you just don't want any change, or you just don't like change. I don't like change I don't like.
Okay.
But I'm always changing. We change every day.
That's true.
We live in an era where there is change all around us every day. Right? And so we need to adapt or we die. And so we all have change in our lives. We're more tolerant of change in some aspects of our lives than in others. If we've got a part of our life that's not going very well, we're more apt to accept change there than in a part that's going really well. Back to your fear of what I'm losing earlier. If we've got something that's going pretty well, we may not want change there because it's working. Leave it alone. I got one part of my life that's working. Leave it alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
There you go.
But on another part of my life where things aren't going well, then maybe I do want change. Sometimes we recycle change, right? I'm reminded right now we're reinstituting red light cameras. And then I'm thinking,
Didn't we do this before?
we did this before and it didn't work. So why are we doing it again? Well, I guess because of a number of factors, things are different now, right? And we don't have as many policemen on the street as, I don't know what the theory is, but whatever it is, someone had a good reason to say we need to cut down on speeding on Montgomery, which has gotten bad. But you know, sometimes we try things differently, and I'm okay with that because sometimes the whole environment has changed, and what didn't work before may work now. Well, that's one of my pet peeves. If somebody says, "Well, we tried that before," you didn't try that thing before in this environment. A lot of things have changed since the last time we tried that. Or we're trying this in a different way, or we've learned from that, and so we're going to do this now.
Well, I think that's a good place to bring it home and to say, as always, we value your feedback. So what do you think? Are these concepts that you can implement in your own journey? Do you have some ways that you diffuse angry people as you are walking through your very curious journey? We'd love to hear from you. So please do take a moment to visit the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. And there's a contact us form there, and you can fill out the little portion that contributes and contribute whatever it is that you would like to address. So please do take a moment to do that. And of course, you can always leave comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you want to add a comment in some of the other venues where this is showing or you're listening to it. So as always, we appreciate your time and your attention, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.